Okay, so hey guys, and welcome back to another predictions video, and in today's video I'm going to be predicting the Nakatani versus Santiago fight. If you are new around here though and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so, like the video if you do indeed like the video, and let's get straight into it. So going into this fight, Nakatani is 26-0 with 19 KOs and Santiago is 28-3-5 with 14 KOs. This fight is for the WBC World Bantamweight title, and this is Nakatani going to become a freeweight world champion. Nakatani's last fight was a win via unanimous decision versus Cortez, and Santiago's last fight was a win via unanimous decision versus Donaire. Santiago is 5'2.5" and Nakatani is 5'7.5". This fight's in Nakatani's home country of Japan. Santiago's losses have come versus Russell in 2021, Garcia in 2014 and Calixto in 2013, and he has been pro since 2012. So to speak a bit more about what I've just been saying, obviously like I've mentioned, this for the WBC World Bantamweight title. This is the belt which Santiago won when he fought Donaire in that last fight of his, and Nakatani is coming up in weight. He's now, like I say, trying to become a freeweight world champion at it's an incredible thing to do. It's an incredible achievement, and I'm going to speak about some of the other fights on this card as well in just a moment. But it's incredible to do. It's seemingly a bit more accomplishable at the lower weights, but it's still very impressive. And Nakatani has been very dominant in his fights, and he's coming off a resounding victory versus Cortez, really, where yes, he did get hurt a little bit at points, but he dropped Cortez, I believe, 3, possibly 4 times, and it was a very impressive performance either way, and a very dominant performance either way, realistically, and against an opponent in Cortez who has caused problems for other fighters in the same division, as other top fighters in the same division. And so the fact that yes, he did show slight bit more weaknesses than what we have seen in the past from him in that fight, he still was very destructive and still put on a very good showing. And Santiago, like I say, he's coming off that win versus Donaire. Donaire being such a dominant fighter, such an impressive fighter in and around the bantamweight division and the lower weight divisions in general throughout his time as a champion. And he was coming off the loss to Inoue, the stoppage defeat. Probably was Santiago's best time to fight him, realistically, and he put out a very good performance, and he did seem like he always was one step ahead of Donaire. And Santiago's seemingly, in my opinion, quite an underrated champion, a champion which a lot of fans are seemingly kind of overlooking to an extent, and people are expecting this to possibly be quite a easy night for Nakatani, and I don't think that would be quite the case. And obviously Nakatani's got such a big height advantage, and is in his home country, but Santiago's used to being the smaller fighter, used to being the one that has to close the range, and is used to he's fighting in other people's home countries and being the underdog in fights. And obviously he has suffered defeats in the past, not really too many as of recent. Obviously the Russell one wasn't too long ago, but since then he has been looking very impressive, and he's faced draws in the past, and sometimes he's not always got the nod which possibly he's deserved. But overall as a fighter, like I say, he's probably at the better point in his career at the moment, and for him it probably is his best time to fight this fight. But to speak about other fights on this card, so Inoue versus Ancayas is on this card for the WBA World Bantamweight title, in which I think Ancayas will win via a unanimous decision. I'm going to go for a bit of an upset, to be completely fair, with this one. Ancayas, I think, is going to be he's not incredible like skill wise. I don't think he's as skillful as Inoue, but I think he could bring Inoue into a bit of a war type fight. And Ancayas has gone through 2 very tough fights with Martinez, and they've been very impressive fights. Obviously, like I said, they're not really overly technical, and he didn't really kind of outbox him at any point, but he showed a lot of heart, showed a lot of will, showed that he's going to be thrown right to the very end and trying to push the pace the whole time. And Inoue, he moves well, but I just don't think he has the power to be able to keep Ancayas off him for the whole night. And when he does end up trying to possibly stand and throw his own shots, I think Inoue can sometimes struggle in that aspect, and I think Ancayas is going to be able to kind of outwork him into the later rounds. And even when Ancayas is tired, which he does get, I think he's going to make a Muay Thai in the process and just be able to outthrow him and outwill him, and then be able to win it via unanimous decision that way. And then also on this card is Tanaka versus Rangel for the vacant WBO World Super Flyweight title, in which I think Tanaka will win via TKO in round 5. Tanaka is trying to become a full division world champion from what I believe, and it's very impressive that he's doing that as well. And it shows the versatility as him as a fighter, and the fact that he can go up in weights and not really seem to have too much of a problem. I don't think this is going to be too much of a difficult fight for him. Rangel, I don't really see too impressive of things in fights that I've seen from him, and I think Tanaka, he's a very well-rounded fighter. I think he's somebody who can definitely be the more skillful one compared to that of Rangel, and I think he's going to be able to, show a bit more and be able to get a stoppage with the power, which he definitely does possess. Obviously he's suffered a defeat in the past versus Ioka, but that Ioka fight, possibly showed a little bit of weaknesses about Tanaka's chin, but I don't think that Rangel's going to be able to do too much about that, and I think it's still, like I said, going to be a comfortable victory for Tanaka. And then he then becomes a 4-weight world champion, WBO champion, I believe, at every weight of that he's performed in, and so the future is going to be bright for him, and it's nice to see that he's getting this kind of big opportunity after defeat that was a while ago against Ioka, and the fact he has rebuilt and the fact that he's still been remaining such a dominant fighter even then shows that he is a world class fighter. And yeah, going back to this the main event fight which I'm talking about. So Nakatani as a fighter, of course, he can punch. He's shown that in pretty much every single one of his fights. I mean, the 19 stoppages plus that last fight which he was so dominant in, and like I say, dropped Cortez with pretty much every body shot that he was landing realistically, and it shows he can most definitely punch, and he's very spiteful in his work. He controls range well, which is very important with a fighter who is so tall and is so rangy as a fighter, and pretty much has to do that because he can't really be affording to fight too much on the inside, because it's just like physical advantage wise, he can't really be affording to do that. He does, seem to use his physical advantages in his favour, which is always important, to be fair. I mean, sometimes you see fighters which are tall, are rangy, do seem to have skill, but just can't seem to keep fighters off of them, and can't seem to keep that distance between them and an opponent, and that's where they can struggle, and that's when they can sometimes lose from. But he seems to be able to do that well. He's accurate, he's got very good fundamentals, he makes adjustments well, he's composed. I like that about him. He's very composed during majority of the fight. He's a great finisher majority of the time. Obviously, he didn't manage to get Cortez out of there, but like majority of the time, like I mentioned, he is a great finisher. And if he isn't finishing you, he's causing a lot of damage and inflicting a lot of damage on parts of your body that's going to hurt. I mean, the fact that he managed to drop Cortez, wait for him to get back up after spitting out the gum shield, then a few shots later drop him again with pretty much the same shot. It's impressive that he managed to find that opening again, and that shows that he is a great finisher in that aspect. He can take a punch, to be fair to him. I mean, he did take a couple big shots against Cortez and he didn't go down, and he did look a little bit hurt at points, but he managed to kind of regain control and make that adjustments like I said he can do, and then managed to come back in and prove himself and even win possible later areas of that round, that same round that he did get hurt in. So he can take a punch. He beats opponents down pretty much the majority of the time. He will just beat you down, break you down, and just be quite destructive. He's got very good shot selection, great jab, and a very well-rounded fight. And the negatives about him, he can be hurt. Like I say, he can take a punch, but he can be hurt. And when he is on the back foot, then if you're against an opponent who's a physical pressure fighter who is going to smother you and not let you find the space, that's when he can struggle. And somebody like Santiago might be able to capitalise upon that. I mean, Nakatani's not amazing on the back foot. He has a bit of a low guard as well, so he can definitely get caught with shots if he's coming in and you're timing him well. So defensive wise, there's not amazing things. When he is in close, he can cross his legs over a bit and seem a little bit off balance as well at points. Obviously, he is going up in weight, so is that going to play any particular factor? It hasn't really so far in his career, but at some point you probably would expect it to. He can be countered, like I say, and his head movement isn't incredible, and the fact that he has got a low guard and not incredible head movement, it's not always the best of recipes. Like I say, if he is going to get timed, then he could definitely get timed coming in. And like I say, if he is on the back foot and he is against a pressure fighter, like I say, that of Santiago is typically, then he could struggle there. But like I say, it's difficult to get past Nakatani's range in the first place. But to speak about Santiago as a fighter, I mean, he's faced adversity in his career much more so than that of, Nakatani. Nakatani's been dominant so far and has a lot of momentum with him, is confident in his ability, but Santiago's had to go that the hard way. Obviously, having them two defeats early on in his career and the one against Russell when he was at that kind of brink of world championship level, to now have won this belt, I'm sure he's not going to want to give it up easily. And the hard work he's put into it, you got to respect that. He's used to being the underdog, like I mentioned. He fights to his game plan well. He doesn't normally get drawn into other opponents' fights, and that's nice to see. He has that game plan and he sticks to it well. He lets his hands go, especially when you get Sue up against the ropes. So if he can get Nakatani up against the ropes with his physical pressure, because he is typically quite physical, then he could definitely let his hands go well. He can fight probably his best in close. He's quite an aware fighter defensively. His defense isn't often amazing, but he's quite aware. He seems to always be knowing what's kind of going on around him. He's got an alright jab. He's a front foot type fighter. He normally tries to outwork you in general. He's got a good shot variation, goes to the body very well to then switch to go back up to the head. And, like I say, shot variation is very impressive, like that of Nakatani. He sets up his shots quite well. He pushes you back, and he has got a nice tighter guard than I'd say that of Nakatani. And overall, like I say, impressive fighter as well. But to speak about the negatives, I mean, sometimes with the amount of draws he has had, obviously, like I say, I feel like he's had the kind of short straw in a couple of the fights. But you'd have to argue that, sometimes he's not winning fights convincingly enough and letting fights being a little bit closer than they necessarily should be. And when you're away from home and you're fighting, in somebody else's home country, that somebody who has the momentum and is going to show confidence throughout the fight, the judges could definitely go into his favour. And if he's not winning convincingly, Santiago, he could struggle with just getting the scorecards in his favour. He can be definitely countered. Sometimes his pressure is a little bit wild and it needs to be a bit more calculated. Sometimes he's just willing to stand there and, he gets a bit too comfortable when he has you up against the ropes and he's just letting his hands go, but then he's not really waiting to see what could be possibly coming back. He can come into range a bit wildly. He definitely has to come into range, and when he does come into range, he's definitely able to be timed and can be wild. He can tire as well. He's not as fast, and when he tires, he's definitely not as fast as Nakatani. He's willing to take shots to come in, and when Nakatani has that power, he's definitely willing to take shots, and his accuracy at points can be a little bit wild, and he can be a little bit reckless, but possibly could catch Nakatani when he lunges in, because I think Nakatani can also be a little bit, reckless at points when he lunges in with his shots, and they're both explosive to an extent, I suppose, and maybe that comes with it at points. Nakatani is the favourite for this fight, and I think that Nakatani will win via unanimous decision. I think he's probably going to be able to outbox him. I think he could possibly struggle in the earlier rounds with Santiago. I'd imagine he's going to put it onto him early, but I think as soon as Nakatani can gauge your distance, gauge your range, I think he could definitely pick shots off well, move him around the ring well. I think Santiago could possibly be moved around the ring well. And then Nakatani, I think he's going to be able to win via decision. I don't think he's going to be able to stop Santiago, but I think he will end up winning via decision. Then who he could go on to fight, I mean, then becoming WBC world champion. I don't think he's going to instantly just move up to super bantamweight. Obviously, I would love to see a fight with him and Inoue at super bantamweight, but I don't think he will. So to defend his belt, possibly against one of the top level contenders, Contreras could be sold as a big fight. I mean, he's somebody who has a very good record, but hasn't really fought anybody of note yet. So possibly you could throw him in against Nakatani just because he's highly ranked in the division. Or if you want him to go for other champions, I mean, obviously the winner versus Inoue versus Ankayas, like I mentioned, for the WBA strap could be made. Or the Rodriguez fight, obviously he's the IBF champion. He's coming off a good win versus Lopez, and so, big fights available to him. Hopefully just big fights remaining now, and I don't think they'll be too particularly hard to be made. Possibly the Rodriguez one might be with if he's fighting with PBC or not, but either way, big fights like I say. But yeah, that is it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy. Like the video if you did indeed. Like the video, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.